Tonight on Bridge City News, an investigation is underway after CP rail train derailed this morning near Colehurst. Dr. Dina Hinshaw strongly advises Albertans to exercise safe practices this weekend to mitigate unnecessary virus spread. And we hear from a local psychologist on how to help your kids tolerate mask wearing.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Good evening, I'm Loris Alexander. Thank you for joining us. Officials from CP Rail are investigating after a train derailed early Saturday morning in the Kip Rail Yard near Colehurst. The train derailed at around 6:30 a.m. There were no reported leaks or spills related to the incident and no injuries to crew members. The province reported 164 new cases of COVID-19 on Friday, prompting a warning from Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health ahead of the Labor Day long weekend.
We are heading into the last long weekend of summer, and I know many people are excited to enjoy it. However, the number of cases being reported today is a clear reminder that we cannot afford to be reckless. COVID-19 does not take holidays, and we have seen weekend barbecues and other gatherings spark outbreaks in the past. I want to encourage all Albertans to have fun while making safety a priority this weekend. Relax, enjoy yourself, but remain vigilant. There are many ways to have fun while still doing it safely. For example, I know our province has many beautiful places to visit on a hopefully warm and inviting Labor Day weekend. If you do visit new places, make sure you're aware of any additional restrictions, such as mandatory mask bylaws, that may be in effect where you're going. Most places we go, we will share with others, so bring a mask and hand sanitizer and plan backup activities if you find yourself in a crowded or unsafe place. Gas pumps, store doors, and shop shelves are high contact areas. If you stop, sanitize your hands before and after pumping gas, shopping, and paying for and taking food at a drive-thru. Wear a mask in indoor spaces where you might not be able to maintain distance at all times. After using a public bathroom, wash your hands for at least 20 seconds and sanitize again after touching the door on your way out. In most cases, being outdoors makes it easier to maintain physical distancing. For those who are camping this weekend, remember that campground operators have COVID-19 protection measures in place, so please follow each campground's guidelines. Alberta Parks is encouraging visitors to bring a mask and wear it.
In most parts of Canada, students are heading back to school for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic started, and parents have a lot of questions about how to properly prepare their kids to wear masks at school. We speak with a local psychologist on what you can do to make mask wearing for kids more fun.
COVID-19 has affected all of us, especially with anxiety. It's taken a big hit to our anxiety. So anxiety is something that we all experience in our bodies, in our behaviors, our emotions, our thoughts. And there's a lot of uncertainty with COVID-19, a lot of changes, and especially when those changes are required, that's when it can create anxiety for us, for all of us. Right? And it can happen for children as well, especially in schools when they're required to wear masks. It's tough, right? Because they've been separated from friends and school and teachers for 6 months. So it's like a huge 6-month summer break. And a lot of them were yearning for that interaction. So last week when school started, children all over Alberta were just so hungry for that. They were just so hungry for that connection and yeah, I could see how boundaries might be really complicated for children when it comes to hugging, when it comes to close contact. Being really serious about it and really, rigid about it can increase anxiety in children. So making it fun is really important. So there's fun stuff you can do with your children. You can encourage them to put masks on their stuffies or their toys and have fun with them. You can involve arts and crafts with their masks. They could paint their masks. They could use glue, glitter, pipe cleaners. They can make it as fun as possible. Of course, when you do that, you can't really wear it, but it's fun for them to associate fun with masks, and to allow them to express their feelings about wearing masks is healthy as well. And that can help relieve the pressure and the anxiety.
Bridge City News stopped by the Lethbridge Farmers Market today, and today's feature is Luco Farms Mustard. We spoke with co-owner Benjamin Luco about what's hot in the mustard business.
We ended up moving up to Lethbridge, and we had our business up and running because we started it in California, and it did really well in California. And then when we moved to Lethbridge, we thought, well, maybe we could get into the farmers market and see if we can maybe sell some product here at the farmers market. We got in, and so it just kind of snowballed, and the mustard business really took off, and here we are. So we have 6 different mustards. One of our best sellers is the sweet and hot, and they're all different varieties of spice and flavor. This year at the farmers market, it's been a lot less patrons and people coming through because of the COVID-19 epidemic. So business has been, it's been good, but it hasn't been as good as the last couple of years. The reason why people should come and visit our booth is because we have a gourmet mustard. It's better than French's mustard. It's, I hate to say it, but we're better than French's. It's a very gourmet mustard, a very sweet mustard, a very hot mustard. And it's just delicious in every way, and it goes with many different recipes and meals. It's immensely important to support the local businesses and the small businesses because in the marketplace, the public is how we survive.
For the sake of faith and spirituality, churches are returning to face-to-face activities under strict health protocols. After months of confinement and limitations on mobility to minimize contagion from COVID-19, worshipers can now find a somewhat unfamiliar norm.
First day, I think our congregation was excited to get back to church because we've all been missing it. We were all missing the community and the fellowship and worshiping together. And so we actually had a pretty good crowd on the first day back.
First day back was July 5th for the Gate Church, and they had approximately 70 people. Now it's a little different, with 40 to 50 people attending services, which is 1/3 of church members. But the church continues to grow, and ESSELMONT and his team hope they can deliver an authentic experience.
It doesn't feel as welcoming because we're all wearing masks and stuff, no matter how much we try. But we do have a host team that's welcoming at the beginning when people come in, to make sure people feel welcome and that they know what's going on and what to expect coming in.
Protocols at the Gate Church seem all too familiar: distancing, sanitizing, and mandatory masks. Changes were also made to Sunday school.
Before COVID, we had a robust children's community, with lots of families and young kids. So during the service, we had what we call a baby gate and kids gate. So it's like a service for them with games and playing and music and teaching and all that good stuff. So
our chairs are set apart for each family group or each cohort group to sit together, and each group is 6 feet apart. We also have a sanitizing station and a mask station as people come into the building. During worship, we have people wearing masks, especially now that they have to at all times, but even before that, we had them wearing masks while singing.
The young pastors believe there is a silver lining to the situation.
Trusting God, but being able to come to Him with our feelings and to speak with Him about what we're going through and to ask Him the questions that we have.
In the middle of a crisis, that's when we need God most, but that's also a time where God works the most.
Recapping one of our top news stories, the province reported 164 new cases of COVID-19 on Friday, prompting a warning from Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health ahead of the Labor Day long weekend. And a look at weekend weather. A special weather statement was issued for Lethbridge and area as we abruptly shift to fall. Today hit a scorching high of 33 with a low of 9 tonight. Tomorrow will be noticeably cooler with periods of rain and a high of 16. Arches, which operated Lethbridge's supervised consumption site, closed their doors on August 31st. A police investigation is now ongoing into the findings of the provincial audit, including $1.6 million in government funding that went unaccounted for. Hal Roberts spoke to Alberta's Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer about potential criminal charges that could be laid. That interview is coming up next.
The Alberta government recently sent its audit of Arches and the Lethbridge supervised consumption site to the Lethbridge Police Service to see if criminal charges could potentially be laid. Now, the recent audit revealed that there was $1.6 million worth of government funding that went unaccounted for. To discuss this in a little more detail is our province's Justice Minister, Doug Schweitzer, joining me from Calgary. Thanks a lot for your time, Doug.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on today.
You bet. Now, what kind of criminal charges are we potentially talking about here in regards to Arches and the supervised consumption site?
Well, when you take a look at this, I mean, it's over now to the police to conduct their investigation, and you don't want to, kind of pre-guess what those charges could be. So it's over to the police now to conduct their investigation to determine whether or not charges would be appropriate in this situation. But it just makes your blood boil, though, when you see, taxpayer dollars go into an organization that is supposed to be used to help, the most vulnerable people in our society, those people that are struggling with addictions, and yet you're seeing trips to Portugal, you're seeing, massive six-figure salaries, and you're seeing money that they can't account for. That's the appropriate step was to send this to the police to see if charges are appropriate in the situation. It's absolutely frustrating, and you know what? And we've also heard the stories of how this has impacted the downtown of Lethbridge and what the consumption site has done to deter small businesses and make people uncomfortable in the downtown. That's why we've done a different approach with our strategy around treatment. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about drug treatment courts and other methods here to get people treatment. It's just not a matter of facilitating drug consumption. It's a matter of giving people treatment and a hope for a future.
Yeah, I know Premier Kenney's also talked about the potential of a mobile SES being set up here in Lethbridge if potentially that Arches and the SES shuts down as it currently stands now. Let's talk about those drug treatment courts. We're talking about opening up one here in Lethbridge. In your opinion, why are they so important?
Well, they have an amazing track record of actually getting people well. So right now in our justice system, you always hear about people that round through the system. They come in, they come out, come in and out. And what this does, it takes somebody that's truly struggling with an addiction and it puts them through a court supervised process for about 12 to 18 months where they have to come and report to a judge on a weekly basis saying, this is what I've done to get better. This is what I've done to get well.
So accountability, right?
Oh, it's a whole accountability. And for many of these people, it's actually far harder than just going and serving a sentence. Because if you go and serve a sentence, you don't have to deal with why you're there in the first place in many instances. So the success rate for those that graduate, 70% of them never come back into the criminal justice system again. So it's really a matter of getting these people well. And when they graduate, many of them reconnect with family, which is so important. They reconnect with family, they get jobs, and they have housing. So they have stability in their lives.
So some of these drug treatment courts, are we actually taking a model from somewhere in the States or Europe?
Well, they originated in the United States for the ones that we've based our model on here, but we have a track record of over a decade in Calgary and Edmonton. So we've doubled the capacity in Calgary and Edmonton, and now we're reaching out and we're going to establish one in Lethbridge. We've announced one in Red Deer, and we're going to launch a few more as well in our mid-sized centers.
Now, the UCP recently announced that it has new laws in place to protect rural property owners from crime. Explain how this new law ensures protections for property owners and ensures that trespassers face consequences for their actions.
Well, we heard this loud and clear. Last year, we did a big tour talking about rural crime and hearing from Albertans as to what they were facing. So we've done lots of different pieces to tackle rural crime. We put in place a rapid force, which is going to get 400 new sheriffs on the ground. We have a new rural police funding model as well, which is going to get another 300 police officers into our rural communities. And then when it comes to property rights as well, I mean, I'm not sure if you remember the Eddie Maurice situation where an individual fired a warning shot because he was tired of his property being stolen. And then the person that initially he faced charges himself. Initially, those ultimately were dropped. But then the person came after him with a civil claim and said, you know what, I'm going to sue you now. And so really, when you see this, we said, look, the balance is not working here. The people that are committing these crimes have more rights than the victims. So we've rebalanced it here in Alberta. So if you take reasonable steps now to protect your property, if you take reasonable steps and you're not charged criminally yourself, you then cannot be pursued for a civil claim. That we made sure we had the strongest property rights there. We've also enhanced trespassing laws. So if somebody continues to trespass on your property, that individual is going to face serious penalties and fines. So we really want to make sure we have the strongest possible property rights in the province of Alberta.
Now, one of these bills passed, was this precipitated because of all of the protests taking place at Hutterite turkey farms?
Well, the Jumbo Valley turkey farm was one of those instances we had. But the thing is, though, you go to every community and you hear a story like this, where people, that are being targeted. Our farmers in Alberta are amazing at what they do. They follow the highest of standards, yet they're being, targeted by these, small special interest groups that don't like farming. They don't like farmers for some reason. They don't like how animals are treated. You can't keep these people happy. You can't negotiate with them. So yeah, we put in place penalties as well, where if you go and trespass on a farmer's property and you're going in there, like this is an occupation of their property and their land. You're really making sure that we can go after those organizations to say, no, not in Alberta, not ever. Our farmers are the foundation of why we are even our province. So let's make sure we give them the protection they deserve.
Now, there are fines and potential jail time as well. Let's talk a bit about those.
Yeah, so we have fines in place. So initially, the fines were just kind of basic, smaller numbers, but now we actually have the ability to find the organizations that are facilitating these things. So really, when you go and look at this, Alberta has the strongest protections now in place in the country. We also, if you remember back to earlier this year when we had all those rail blockades going on, we had people blockading people's ability to get to work, and all these special interest groups, their whole goal was to shut down the economy. So what we did is, we brought in place the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, where if organizations are purposely illegally blockading, critical infrastructure, those organizations are going to face thousands of dollars worth of fines every single day that they do that.
Now, many rural Albertans I've spoken with are angry at the Liberal government and their new gun ban, banning over, 1,500 types of guns. These farmers and ranchers say they need the guns to protect themselves, as we talked about earlier, their families and their livestock, since RCMP may be 30 minutes to an hour away if an intruder shows up in a threatening manner. Now, what are you hearing? Are legal, responsible gun owners still upset?
Oh, when we met earlier this year with Minister Blair, the Minister of Public Safety, and Minister Lametti, the Federal Minister of Justice. So we met with these Liberal justice ministers, and we told them, consult widely in Alberta. Make sure that you go out there and you listen to people and you do this thoughtfully. Instead, what we got was a rushed policy with kind of half-baked, with no clarity as to what the end result is going to be. So all of a sudden you have a bunch of people that are lawful, firearms owners, and now all of a sudden, they don't know up from down. They don't know how they're supposed to hand these firearms back in, or if they should. So really, that's just caused chaos in our lawful firearm community. And on top of that, it doesn't get to the root cause of crimes that are being committed with firearms, because 80% of the crimes that are being committed with firearms, those guns are illegally brought in from the United States. So we told our federal counterparts, look, if you're serious about going after gun crime, you have to go after organized crime. On top of that, you have to make sure you crack down the border. That's really the big cause here of firearm use in Canada. And we told them that. They ignored our advice. So that's why we've brought in place a chief firearms officer for the province of Alberta. Initially, this program was run by the federal government, but we're going to take ownership of that here. More Alberta, less Ottawa. We're going to take ownership of this, and we're going to put a chief firearms officer in place from Alberta.
Now, Premier Jason Kenney is looking into a potential provincial police force similar to what Ontario is using right now, what we had many years ago. What would that look like, replacing the RCMP, Doug?
Well, this is one of those things. We had our Fair Deal panel last year and into early this year that went out and talked to Albertans, and they came back recommending that Alberta set up an Alberta Police Service here for the province to replace the RCMP. So right now, my department is looking through, what does that mean? What is the cost of that going to be? What's the infrastructure that we have to set up? Training facilities, forensic labs, police stations. So we're looking into doing our homework right now, and by early to mid next year, we'll have that report for Cabinet, and we'll be able to make a decision whether or not it makes sense to proceed with an Alberta Police Service.
So just off the top of your head, what are some of the advantages of having a provincial police force over the RCMP?
Well, I think the biggest thing you hear is stability, and it's the continuity, where you have somebody from your community that's going to be on your police service. Quite often now, the RCMP, they do good work, but quite often they'll have people that aren't from Alberta, and they won't know where the different towns are. They won't know where, how the community fabric that brings it all together. They won't have that continuity. The other thing too with the Alberta Police Service is that it'll also allow us to keep people here longer. The RCMP, they send people all over Canada. It'll provide that greater continuity as well.
Some people I've talked to, some of the critics are saying that the advantage of the RCMP, you've got this national database, so it's easy to reach out to different jurisdictions. If somebody's wanted, let's say in Swift-Current, Saskatchewan, Halifax, Nova Scotia, we've got this national database, but that's not going to be the case with the provincial police force. It'll be harder because you have to deal with different, police services across the country.
Well, and you know what? This is one of those things. We have technology now that allows databases to talk to each other. It's something that we could very easily figure out. I mean, even in Alberta, we have, you got the Tabor police, you've got Lethbridge, you got Medicine Hat, you have all these different municipal ones, and we find a way to communicate with each other when there's particularly when you have an individual that is definitely needed to be brought in. So we have a way to communicate with each other. I'm not concerned about our ability to have databases talk to each other.
So Doug, what steps is the province taking to eliminate the shortage of prosecutors?
So we campaigned on bringing in 50 new prosecutors in the province of Alberta. So we're actually actively hiring right now to bring in these additional prosecutors. But it's similar to if you wanted to grow your police service, you have to recruit as well. So we've actually doubled the number of students that we have coming in, so young lawyers that graduated law school, and we're having them go to different communities across Alberta. So we've doubled the capacity, and next year we're actually going to have the largest articling student class in the entire province, larger than any of the private law firms as well, to make sure that every year we bring in more talent to be able to fill our ranks of prosecutors. For too long, we just weren't recruiting enough. And as a result, we kind of had this slow depletion in our ranks of prosecutors where we couldn't keep up with the caseload. So we're changing that strategy. We're also out there hiring more prosecutors as well so we can deal with cases, because the former government under the NDP brought in what they called a triage, where they would just simply drop the non-priority cases. And we've heard loud and clear from Albertans that if the police go through the time to find someone, to charge them, that they want to make sure that the full extent of the law is pursued by our prosecutors. And a lot of that is making sure they have the capacity themselves to handle the caseload.
The COVID-19 pandemic has been a big challenge for many Albertans, many Canadians, and all around the world. But there's still also a big drug crisis in many towns and cities across our province, including here in Lethbridge. Now, our Mayor, Chris Spearman, was saying how much of a need there is for a full-time scan unit in our city to help permanently shut down the drug houses. Because right now, they shut down one and another one opens up three doors down the block, and it's just a vicious cycle. Is one forthcoming?
So on that front there, I mean, we have Scan that provides services. We did shut down a house in Lethbridge earlier this year. We are actually investing, though, in the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team. This is a coordinated effort between different policing agencies. It's very technical, specific, and they go after organized crime. They've had an immense amount of success as well. So when you see the big busts that get the drugs and the guns off the street, quite often the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team is behind it. And we actually just made a real strategic investment in the Lethbridge area to provide further officers for this team to go after organized crime.
Now, some jurisdictions in the United States have brought forth body cams that local law enforcement have to wear. Any chance we can maybe see mandatory body cams being worn by police throughout the province?
Well, you know what? This is a really interesting technology, and we're doing a consultation right now on the future of the Police Act, as well as the future of police policy in the province of Alberta. And our plan is to have some answers on this later this year and into the fall of next year regarding the future of those areas. But I've seen some of these technologies. I'm not sure if you remember the show Cops back in the day in the 90s, where you'd have them going with the police service, and they'd actually kind of narrate their life. Oh, we're pulling up here. We got a situation. I've seen some of these body camera technologies where the police will actually narrate their life as to what they're doing in the situation to provide better evidence for court. So like, I got this call, I come in, and it has the ability potentially to create a better accountability for the police, but also better evidence for the courts as well. So we're giving it a serious look right now in the province of Alberta.
Doug, oftentimes when there is a divorce, dads struggle to see their kids. Is it possible to reform family court without the Family Lawyers Association lobbying against it? I mean, apparently it's a billion-dollar business that hurts families and fathers and only benefits lawyers financially.
Well, it's one of those things where we have to make sure that the justice system works for Albertans. And I get letters every single day from parents that are going through a family system right now that is just not working for them. And they feel as though it's actually made their relationship with their children, it's damaged their family unit, even when they're trying to get along with their former spouse and trying to find some way to work together. So we're listening to that. And some of the things too is that some of these issues shouldn't be in the court system at all. Like there's ways that you could actually deal with family issues outside of a court process that would probably be far smoother from a process standpoint. It would probably cause less acrimony between the parents as they kind of try and find their new normal. And really, we're looking for some solutions there to help save people money too. Because in many of these instances, the person that profits is the lawyer. And it really should be about what's in the best interest of the family and the kids.
Legal Aid Alberta introduced a new initiative called Advance Appearance Duty Council, which allows people to prepare for court by phone or email instead of making a trip to the courthouse in person. Now, it's temporary until August 28th. Doug, Legal Aid says this was important to have during the pandemic since the Alberta courts reopened. Your thoughts?
You know what? During this pandemic, we've actually had an amazing amount of advancement in technology use, video conferences, different ways that we can get our court system continuing to function in a pandemic. And a lot of these things are actually really useful tools that we should look at keeping for the long term. And I think it also helps level the playing field because quite often legal services get concentrated in Calgary and Edmonton, and the bigger, the Court of Appeal matters, things like that. But by using video technology, there's no reason why a lawyer in Lethbridge or Tabor or Medicine Hat couldn't be able to provide those same services that are provided in the bigger cities, and it helps level that playing field. So we're looking at lots of different ways to keep technology use kind of at a premium in our court system.
Alberta Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer, thanks for joining me today from Calgary.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Children today are constantly using digital devices, gaming systems, computers, and cell phones. Unfortunately, this does bring with it the risk of encountering online predators. How much responsibility for their safety should we be carrying as parents and adults? To talk more about it is Charlene Dokebauer, founder of Internet Sense First and author of The Internet, Are Children in Charge? Charlene, welcome back to BCN.
Well, thank you for having me, Hal. It's great to be here.
Charlene, share a little bit about your group and how it all began for you.
The charity Internet Sense first started because we had a family member affected by the crime of child pornography at the age of 4 by neighbors. And yes, I say neighbors. We can't trust anyone anymore, it seems. And eventually she lived her life independently, got into drugs and alcohol, and then was killed by a drunk driver when she was 22. And as a network administrator, I discovered child pornography. I don't talk about the employer because I did a lot of freelancing as well. And you don't know that garbage until you see it. And once that happened, I decided to start a charity in memory of my family member and in support of all children online.
And you do some public speaking and teaching on this, and you have some teaching materials for parents as well?
Mainly my book is probably the best resource for parents because it's very comprehensive. I do speaking. I've spoken in Iceland, Europe, India, the United States, Canada, and I go where I'm asked. And I believe that everyone needs to know about my theory of digital supervision.
Charlene, how many parents actually monitor their kids' online activities? Do we actually know what they're watching, or are we dropping the ball sometimes?
Most parents are dropping the ball all the time, I have to say, because the vulnerabilities of our children are huge now. They can be on any platform, and predators know exactly where they are. That's where they go, where their prey is. And the other big problem is that children are becoming the victimizers because of what they're seeing online. There's an epidemic of child-on-child sexual assault that I can get into in a few minutes and in a little more detail.
But getting back to the predators for just a moment here, Charlene, are a lot of, let's say, adults posing as maybe 13 or 14-year-old boys or girls online?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. 9, 10-year-old children. They can even get machines that will disguise their voice as a young child, which makes it so difficult for our children.
I hear many parents say simply, you know what, I can't keep up. My kids know a lot more about technology than I do. So if that's the case, what do you say to those parents? How do you encourage them?
Well, I encourage them to realize that I'm not pointing my finger at parents that they're not doing a good job. I'm saying that traditional parenting is still necessary, but we need to digitize our parenting. We're very busy taking our children to school, hockey games, basketball, dance classes, and then we give them the key to our router. And these children are the most independent of any generation in the history of the world. And we have to start supervising them while they're on digital devices. And my theory of digital supervision, I've written to be very user-friendly so that parents are not intimidated. We just had a summit in London, and it's called the International Summit to End Internet Child Exploitation. It was very well attended. We had people from Africa, Spain, Colombia, all over the place. One father bought my book, and he said, I can't tell you the relief I have in practicing digital supervision. I actually have a handle on what my children are doing. And I also want 6 more books. And I said, why? You want to read it 7 times? And he said, No, I want it for the parents of my children's friends so that they will be practicing digital supervision as well.
You know, Charlene, parents can't be everywhere all the time, and it's hard to keep track of what our kids are watching. Perhaps parents need to be a little more intentional. Do we need to really map out a plan, that digital plan that you were discussing?
Absolutely. One thing I mention in my book is that parents should draw up a contract of use with their children. And I say with them. You sit at the table together with them and say, this is the cell phone. We're docking it at 7 o'clock at night. You can pick it up at 7 o'clock in the morning. We will be going through your cell phone, looking at pictures, because the epidemic of nudes for these children is huge. They're taking pictures of themselves nude, sending them, and even though it's their body, they're producing and distributing child pornography, which then the parents own, because essentially the parents own the cell phone. And when I talk to parents about that, they say, you mean we're responsible? Yes, you are, for a minor's activities, but they cannot own a cell phone until they're 18. So therefore, it is your plan, your phone, your iPad.
Is that considered sexting then, when a lot of these kids are taking pictures of their private parts or nude photos and sending them to each other? Is that what they call
That's
sexting?
sexting. Yes, it is, Hal. And it's epidemic. I've talked to so many principals. Every time I speak in a school, a principal will whisper and say, we've had a child charged for this. And I say, no need to worry about it. It's in every school. It's in Canada, the United States, England, New Zealand. It's everywhere. And if people would start practicing digital supervision, which is user-friendly, they would know what their children are doing.
How about if we took that router and kept it in the parents' bedroom and maybe continually change the password each day?
I advise everyone to put the router in the parental bedroom for two reasons. Number one, you can turn it off at night. Someone complained about what about the electronics in the bedroom, and I say it's not going to bother you if it's turned off. And the other reason, you can turn it off, your kids can't turn it on if it's in your bedroom. But the second reason is you're telling your children you're in charge. The location of the router in a common area is not a good idea. If we're paying for it, our children need to know.
I have some parents that tell me, you know what, when you're finished your homework, then I'm going to give you access to the new password for Wi-Fi. And a lot of times the kids do their homework is that they keep changing and updating it each and every day. Now, Charlene, should we also invest in some software to block pornography sites in our homes?
There are two ways of looking at that. You can get software to block pornography, and that will wear off when the child's about 8 or 9. They can work around software very easily. For this part of digital supervision, I tell parents to make sure they have a filter between their router and the computer, the host computer. And the router can divide the internet. There's one company that calls it a bright web, so that the child will go up into the bright web and be able to go on the internet without going on sites like that. The unfortunate thing is that does not work when the child is on a cell phone or they're gaming. Gaming can cause a few more issues so that the child cannot be as easily monitored. So parents need to be aware of that and realize that humanity has to supervise humanity. We need to be around the devices. We need to review browser history. And when children realize their parents are reviewing the browser history, as a former educator, I know they'll erase it and put up the science project and the research on history. We need to start looking at the actual history, looking at what they're doing. If a child turns off a monitor, as soon as you go into a room, you go in and turn it back on. You don't let them off with that. Who is in charge? Right now, our children are in charge of the internet too often. We need to take charge and take our children back and be able to talk to them and supervise them.
I love that, absolutely. Now, what do we need to teach our kids specifically when it comes to online safety? Avoid chat rooms, for one?
Avoid chatting, avoid sending anything like a picture without the geolocator being turned off, things like that. And what I tell everyone now is that our children in many ways are being given too much ownership for decisions online. For example, a child knowing at the age of 8 whom they should speak with online is asking an awful lot of an 8-year-old. I don't know of an 8-year-old that plans dinner, let alone who they're going to talk to online. It's a tough call, and parents need to be talking to their children a lot about that. They need to be online games to see how their children are communicating online. Is your child a bully or a victim or a victimizer? Are they bullying a child into sending a nude, which is happening too much? Do you know if your child is going to commit suicide? They communicate all this online. If you're not online supporting your children and supervising, we are lacking in our parenting skills. We need to digitize.
You know what's really scary as well at the same time, Charlene, is how much information kids share with strangers as opposed to their own parents who love and care for them. Do parents need to set a firm limit on how much time kids spend on their digital devices? You mentioned something about 7 o'clock, give me your phone until maybe 7 o'clock the next morning, and as well, maybe social media sites?
Yes, now that can be difficult because even when I'm at a business meeting, I'll ask everyone to put their phones away because it's intimidating when someone's looking at a phone and you're a speaker. Try telling a child you're taking away their cell phone, which is why a contract before they even get a cell phone is so important. They're on digital devices too much. Yes, there should be limitations. And it's kind of funny, Hal, at this point that people will tell them you're only going to watch TV tonight. You can't go on the iPad. And I just sort of, that's punishment, is going on television rather than being online. There's just so much in my book about this, taking away a cell phone, what you need to look out for, what you need to look out for with a child that might be groomed by a predator. There's so much in digital supervision, but you know what, Hal? We can all do it, and we have to do it.
Charlene, is it too harsh saying kids should not have cell phones until maybe the age of 14 or 15, or waiting to have an Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, or Facebook account until they're about the same age?
It's not out of the question, but I think my words would be good luck because so many children have them. It's again, if parents are giving the cell phones, tell your children you're going to be checking everything on that cell phone. And I mean everything. You press on every icon. They will create an icon for their nudes that looks as though it's a calculator or just a beach somewhere. Do children lie? Of course they do. I've been a teacher at parent-teacher night, and parents will say, my children never lie to me. And I would look at them and say, well, I lied to my parents. In fact, my poor sainted mother, I probably still tell the odd lie. We do. We want approval from our parents. We want to get off with things that maybe we shouldn't be doing. And this is where digital supervision comes in. Don't let them lie to you about the internet. Supervise. And you mentioned TikTok. TikTok is a very scary environment because kids are doing live streaming of nudes, of dancing and things like that. And I hesitate to mention one environment because this can happen anywhere. We have Facebook, we have FaceTime, we have live streaming everywhere. And predators love to get the live streaming. They are recording it as a child is doing it, but the child thinks it's being erased. And then the predator will sell it. And then when the child might find out who's looking at my pictures today, it's just a never-ending story.
Yeah, it's a dark world we're living in right now. Now, part of the challenge is that your kids will have access to their computers and their phones during school hours, and you're at work. How do you manage that?
Well, for one thing, I advise everyone on a cell phone especially to put a keylogger on. And a keylogger will record every key that a child presses on the cell phone, as well a comprehensive one will record all the pictures. And a parent can put that on before the child even gets the phone, and every night they can have a report sent to them so that they will know exactly what the child is involved in. You can put a type of filter on cell phones. Again, the kids can get around them. They talk about this in school all the time. We get around all that. But the key logger is a pretty good source. Looking at it is another one. I had one parent actually take her router to work every day,
Wow.
which because she had an extreme problem with her child.
Wow.
And they're just, it's difficult.
But you know, if the child has a data plan, who needs the router? How many parents actually take the time to sit down with their kids and have a really good heart-to-heart talk about internet safety and the potential consequences?
Very few. I've talked to people just casually about digital supervision. And one fellow said, well, I talked to my 14-year-old son last night and he told me he didn't do anything and I'm good with that. And I'm like, really? Your child is lying. There's no question. The kids are all involved in this stuff. And I looked at him, I thought, no, I don't think I need to go any further. He was just blocking it. He should be looking at the devices every day at random. Take a look, see what your kids are doing, see what pictures are on their galleries. I've interviewed kids in high school that said there are thousands of these nudes on on galleries. Are parents looking? They couldn't be, because the parents can be charged for possession of child pornography. And we had an incident in London, Ontario. A 9-year-old was sending videos over TikTok to a 35-year-old. And the FBI tipped off the police. And this is a scenario most parents would not want to have. The police came knocking at their door at 6:45, opened the door, confiscated all computer equipment, the parents and the child's, because the parents are suspect. Are they allowing this? Because there are some parents allowing this and selling these videos for their income. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Do you want to have that conversation with the police? And that's not just parents, grandparents. Are kids visiting you with your wide open networks? Are you looking at what they're doing while they're in your home? A child visiting another kid, what are they doing?
Yeah, that's incredible. Charlene Doka-Bauer, founder of Internet Sense First, thanks a lot for joining me today from Ontario.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you so much.
As the dust settles and economies slowly reopen after months of COVID-19 restrictions, those in developing nations are still dealing with rising numbers of coronavirus cases. Compassion Canada is a charitable organization committed to helping children and their families in these developing nations to prosper and live in health during the crisis. Joining me now to talk about it is the President and CEO of Compassion Canada, Allison Alley. Welcome back to BCN, Allison.
Thank you, Hal. It's great to be with you again.
Allison, how has COVID-19 really impacted your group, Compassion Canada?
Yeah, well, Compassion works in 37 countries in low, middle, and high-income economies and countries. And this pandemic has impacted every single location we work, right? There's a reason why we call it a virus that knows no borders. And so not dissimilar to in Canada, government quarantines were put in place in every area we work. Our offices were closed and staff were sent to work from home overnight around the globe. And so our focus since then as global leaders has been, how can we come together and adapt and respond to not just the changing needs of kids living in poverty, but the critical and increasing needs that they're facing?
So what hurdles specifically have children and families living in poverty really come up against?
Yeah, so for kids and families living in extreme poverty, everything about COVID-19 is magnified for them. The risk, the fear, the uncertainty, the life and death reality that they face. Because many of the families that we serve have no safety net, right? So their survival is on the line when something like a health or an economic crisis hits. Many of them are day laborers, which means if they're unable to go out and earn a daily wage, they're unable to put food on their table at night. But beyond that, experts are also talking about the cascading effects of this pandemic. We anticipate hunger may double by the end of the year. We see the pandemic triggering, an increase in preventable diseases like malaria and measles. And really, it could undo more than 10 years of progress towards combating poverty. And so this is a crisis for the world's poor, unlike anything we've ever seen.
Allison, have staff members been able to visit the homes of the sponsored kids? And if so, what measures have they taken to really prevent the spread of COVID-19?
Yeah, our program has always been locally led and contextualized with a focus on knowing, loving, and protecting kids based on their unique needs and the unique challenges that they face. But in this season, as you can imagine, our staff and our partners are having to be more creative and adaptive than they've ever had to be in how they go about doing that. But they're getting in front of them. They're visiting their homes when they're able to do that. They're delivering food and hygiene kits. They're making mask and hand sanitizer, educating communities through flyers and digital campaigns. And of course, a critical part of our work right now is trauma counseling and child protection, because when there's crisis in the home and when there's instability, kids are often the ones that are the most impacted as violence in the home increases. So we're working on that as well, of course.
Can you comment on the strain this crisis has had specifically on medical services in some of these developing countries?
Yeah, the countries that we work in, Hal, already have fragile and strained medical and health systems. So, as you can imagine, when you add COVID-19 to the picture, it becomes even more critical because they have to choose where to allocate their already limited resources. It's not dissimilar to what we saw during the Ebola epidemic when West African countries had no choice but to really devote their limited resources to battling the deadly disease. But it meant that other important life saving interventions like basic vaccinations or maternal health were neglected. And that basically led to a rise in maternal deaths. And so it is dire. It's staggering how under resourced they are and the implication of that. But actually, it's interesting timing because I was just on a call with our National Director of Compassion Ecuador right before talking to you, Hal. And he had talked about how, in addition to all the ways that they're helping kids and families access medical services or give them access to private hospital care if needed, they've also created a new telehealth program. And so they've created this phone number similar to telehealth that we would have that these kids and families can call to access a network of doctors and practitioners and counselors. But what I love about this is that some of those medical professionals are former sponsored children who have gone through our leadership development program and are now doctors and nurses. So incredible work's being done.
Wow, great success stories. Nice to hear that. Now, are cases of the virus, Allison, increasing or decreasing in some of these developing nations?
Yeah, the spread and the impact of the virus is certainly different everywhere that we work, but it is definitely continuing to increase. Developing countries now account for 3/4 of the new daily cases that are being reported. But of course, we know that with the limitations of testing in those contexts, the numbers are much, much higher. But it is increasing the fastest in Latin America right now, faster than anywhere in the world. We happen to work in Brazil, which, if you're following the news, that's now become one of the new epicenters of the pandemic, right? And they're anticipating that its numbers are going to surpass the United States in the coming weeks. For us, we've got our eye on the fact that it's spreading into the Northeast region, which is where most of the country's impoverished regions are. And it's also moving into indigenous territories in the Amazon, which, as you can imagine, we were just talking about limited medical care. That would be most certainly the case there.
So how about education? Are people able to get out to some of these regions, the far remote regions of the Amazon or maybe in Latin America, and explaining that, social distancing, physical distancing is important, not to spread the virus, the masks and so forth?
Yeah, I mean that's the challenge. It's education is always a struggle. First of all, in getting to the remote regions, as you said, but even those who have access to education, formal education, are no longer able to go. So for us as an organization, we have been working as it relates to just healthcare and prevention education to provide that in creative ways. We have different social media and digital campaigns. We've been putting flyers up in communities, but we also have been creating videos and FaceTime calls with students who have been preparing, for example, for end of year exams or for different schoolwork. We've ensured to get in front of them and support them in their more formal academic and educational needs as well.
Now, Compassion Canada also has this thing called We Rise as One initiative, helping out in some of these developing countries. Allison, let's chit-chat a bit about that.
Yeah, well, ultimately, we feel like a global crisis warrants a global response. And so our worldwide Compassion family has come together for the first time to launch a global fundraising campaign to help the most critically vulnerable children and families. And so we're inviting exactly that folks around the globe to join us and to rise as one, to lift up their voice, to give their influence, but also to respond practically to those who so desperately need it. So, specifically, how we're raising funds to give at risk children, families, and communities the health and stability they need through hygiene, food, and shelter.
What is in some of these kits actually that has the food and hygiene?
Yeah, so for hygiene, it would include really practical things like hand sanitizer, soap, vitamins, supplements, cleaning supplies, protective masks, and of course, as we talked about education, the tools on how to use it and why it's important. But we also have these food kits that we're handing out. And it's probably worth noting that food security is becoming one of the most prominent and severe risks, not just for the people that we serve, but for those experiencing COVID-19 in these low income economies. Because, as I said, they're unable to make income, which makes them unable to provide food, but also how we're seeing already that global supply chains are starting to break down. When there's food shortages and shortage of supply, we know that the price goes up, which is just magnifying and intensifying the need for these families. So for us, we are providing practical kits that include things like rice and eggs and milk and corn and other non-perishables. While also a large part of our work is on helping pregnant and new moms. And so we ensure that these pregnant and nursing mothers have the nutrition and supplements that they need as well.
You know, they sound fairly helpful. Will Compassion continue to give out the kits after the coronavirus crisis?
Yeah, I mean, this is a short-term relief that we're doing as part of our long-term sustainable development efforts. And so we always focus on the holistic well-being of the kids that we serve. We work to grow them spiritually, socially, physically, and cognitively. And therefore, things like hygiene and food and stability are a regular part of what we do. But as we move forward and enter new phases of development, the way that we offer them and how we do it will continue to change based on their unique needs and the opportunities around them.
You know, Allison, even before we've ever heard of COVID-19, your organization was involved in something called holistic child development work. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so that recognizes that we as human beings are whole beings, and we can so often think of poverty as just an economic challenge that requires a financial response. But we, particularly as a faith-based organization, recognize that not dissimilar to how Jesus grew. It says in Luke 2:52 that Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God, and in favor with man. We follow that model and develop kids spiritually, socially, physically, and cognitively so they can really flourish into their full God-given potential and contribute wholly to the community around them.
Let's talk more specifically now about how Compassion Canada works. On your website, you say that we shouldn't respond to poverty by just handing out food and Bibles, correct?
Yeah, we really think that it's important, first of all, to have a long-term model that prioritizes and highlights the local, national people. And so I think the first thing to understand, and I will answer your question more directly, but the first thing is we work only with national offices and partner with local churches who have been there before Compassion, will be there after Compassion, and really know the names and the faces and the needs of their communities. And because of that, they understand that poverty is complex, development is complex, and not dissimilar to how we think about our needs, Hal, the needs of our kids, the needs of our society. They work to address all of those needs as well and say, yeah, there's a physical component, but there's also social, interpersonal, there's family needs, there's community needs. And so they work to grow kids holistically in that context in appropriate ways.
Now we pray that God would bless and support various nonprofits, including your own, which honor him and bring him glory. How can our viewers bless you? What are you specifically needing help with? Is it maybe volunteers?
Yeah, well, first of all, we appreciate your prayer. There's so much need, as you can imagine, and we are facing an incredible amount of cases, in our beneficiaries and their families, and of course are starting to encounter deaths of the kids that we serve or of our frontline partners and volunteers. So pray for them and the impact on their family. But specifically, absolutely, we're always looking for volunteers. And actually, we launched this We Rise as One campaign with our volunteers, which are really close family members of our organization, just last night. And so you can check out different volunteer opportunities on our website, which is compassion.ca.
Yes, for more information, definitely check out that website and continue with the great work around the world. Great job, Allison.
Thank you so much, Hal. Appreciate your time.
Allison Alley, President and CEO of Compassion Canada. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.